There was a small town named Willow Creek, located in the middle of nowhere. It was an isolated place surrounded by dense forests and mountains, where the townsfolk led a simple life. The town had a history of strange happenings and paranormal occurrences that the locals believed to be the work of vengeful spirits. There was one particular ghost that the town feared the most. Her name was Tilly, and she was a young woman who had been accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake over 200 years ago. Her ghost was said to haunt the woods around the town, seeking revenge on those who had accused her of witchcraft. Tilly's ghostly figure was a sight that no one who had seen it could ever forget. Her skin looked charred as though there was a fire burning beneath it, and her eyes were a deep, dark void that seemed to suck in all the light around them. Her hair was long and tangled, and it looked as though it was made of black smoke that was constantly swirling around her head. But perhaps the most eerie aspect of Tilly's appearance was the way she held her hands behind her back at all times, as though she was hiding something. And her face was always contorted in a pained expression, as though she was constantly reliving the agony of her execution. Despite her terrifying appearance, there was also a sadness about Tilly that was palpable. Her ghostly figure exuded a sense of longing and desperation, as though she was searching for something that she could never find. Many of the townsfolk had reported seeing Tilly wandering the woods at night, and some had even claimed to have heard her whispering to them. But no one dared to approach her, as her ghostly figure was enough to strike fear into the bravest of hearts. One summer, a group of teenagers decided to camp in the woods near Willow Creek. They had heard about the legend of Tilly's ghost and wanted to see if it was true. As they set up camp, they heard strange noises coming from the woods. They dismissed it as just the wind and continued to set up camp. As the night grew darker, they started to feel uneasy. They heard footsteps around their campsite and saw shadows moving in the darkness. Suddenly, they saw a figure emerging from the woods. It was Tilly's ghost, and she was coming straight for them. The teenagers ran for their lives, but Tilly's ghost was too fast. She chased them through the woods, and they could feel her icy breath on their necks. They could hear her laughter echoing through the woods, and they knew that they were in grave danger. Finally, they stumbled upon an old abandoned house, and they thought they could hide there. But Tilly's ghost was right behind them, and they knew that they were trapped. They could hear her banging on the doors and windows, trying to get in. Suddenly, one of the teenagers remembered a legend that said that Tilly's ghost could be appeased by an offering of food. They quickly gathered some food from their backpacks and placed it outside the door. To their surprise, the banging stopped and the laughter died down. The teenagers thought that they had escaped Tilly's ghost, but they were wrong. When they woke up the next morning, they found that they were no longer in the abandoned house. They were back in their campsite, with no memory of how they had gotten there. As they packed up their campsite and prepared to leave, they saw a shadowy figure watching them from the woods. It was Tilly's ghost, and she had not been appeased by their offering. After the terrifying encounter with Tilly's ghost, the surviving teenagers could not shake off the feeling of dread that lingered with them. They were desperate to know more about Tilly's backstory and why she had become a vengeful spirit. They went to the town's library and found an old dusty book that detailed the history of Willow Creek. According to the book, Tilly was a young woman who had been accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake over 200 years ago. Her accusers had claimed that she had cursed the town, and that she had made a pact with the devil. The book also explained why people believed that food appeased her. It was said that Tilly had always been a kind-hearted woman who had helped the townsfolk during times of need. Before her execution, she had begged the townsfolk to offer food to the poor in her memory. It was believed that Tilly's ghost still roamed the woods, seeking to fulfill her wish by accepting food offerings. The surviving teenagers were fascinated by Tilly's tragic story, and they wanted to know more. They decided to explore the woods and see if they could find any clues that would shed light on her mysterious death. As they walked deeper into the woods, they stumbled upon the same old abandoned cabin, but there was a strange aura around it that made them feel uneasy. They cautiously approached the cabin and noticed that there was a book lying on the doorstep. The book was an old diary that belonged to Tilly. They eagerly opened the book and started to read. The diary contained a detailed account of Tilly's life, her love for a young man named Daniel, and how her life had taken a turn for the worse when she had been accused of witchcraft. They learned that Tilly had not made a pact with the devil, but that she had been falsely accused by jealous townsfolk who were envious of her beauty and her relationship with Daniel. They also learned that Tilly had been pregnant with Daniel's child when she had been burned at the stake. The surviving teenagers were horrified by the injustice that had been done to Tilly. They vowed to do everything in their power to ensure that her story was told, and that justice was served. They went back to the town and organized a memorial service for Tilly. They invited the townsfolk, and they shared Tilly's tragic story with them. They also shared the food offerings that they had brought as a tribute to Tilly. As they sat in the memorial service, they felt a strange presence around them. They turned around, and to their amazement, they saw Tilly's ghost standing in the doorway. But this time, she looked at peace, and she smiled at them. The surviving teenagers knew that Tilly's ghost had finally found peace, and that justice had been served. They felt a sense of closure, and they knew that they could finally move on from the horrors that they had encountered in the woods. From that day on, the townsfolk of Willow Creek remembered Tilly as a kind-hearted woman who had been wronged by a town consumed by fear and jealousy. And her legacy lived on, as the town started to offer food to the poor in her memory, as she had wished so long ago.